Good evening and welcome to this meeting of West Berkshire Council's Eastern Area Planning Committee. I am Councillor Alan McCrow and I'm Chairman of the committee. The other members of the committee present this evening are Councillor Richard Somner, who is also the Vice Chairman, and Councillors Jeremy Cottam, Jeff Mays, Justin Pemberton and Clive Taylor. The following officers are in attendance to advise and support the meeting. Simon Till, Planning Team Manager, Alice Atwood, Senior Planning Officer, Gareth Dowding, Principal Engineer, Traffic and Road Safety, Thea Nolly, Acting Senior Paralegal, Legal Services, Jess Bayliss, Clerk, Thomas Radbourne, our Zoom host. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone present in the chamber to make sure you switch on your microphones when invited to speak directly into them and to switch them off when finished. Can I also ask you to make sure you put your mobile phones to silent and have turned off the sound on your laptops. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route and please follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin Pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it's safe to proceed. When voting, only members present in the chamber can vote, and voting will be by a show of hands. And could I ask members when they do vote if they could keep their hands raised until I move on to the next stage of the voting, please, to make sure that both the officers can note the votes and also for them to be shown on the streaming. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will proceed? Yeah. Okay. So move on then to item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chairman. So I've received apologies from councillors Vicky Paul and Ross McKinnon.
Thank you. Move on then to item 2, the minutes. Please have minutes. Have members had a chance to read the minutes? They were emailed out a couple of days ago. I was going to ask if anybody has any issues with the minutes. Is any amendments needed? No, sir. So Councillor Cottam has proposed that they be accepted. Councillor Somner, thank you. Seconded. So the minutes of the meeting for the 5th of June have been approved, and I will now sign them. Date, the 10th.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Just to note that I've just received apologies from Paul Kander as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to make a declaration of interest, please? Thank you. We'll move on then to item 4 and the first application, 23/01699, Travellers Fend, Crookham Common. Could I ask Simon Till to present the application, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I'll just share my screen. Thank you, Chairman. Members, this application is for the demolition of the existing building on the site and the erection of a building to provide 20 flats for persons with learning disabilities. The application is recommended for approval and it comes before committee because of the number of objections. The application site was formerly a public house, but it has fallen out of use as such And I shall now show you some visuals of the existing site. Oh, no, apparently I won't. Just bear with me. Okay, so this is a view of the building that is to be retained, which I understand contains the shop. This is the view of the public house proposed for demolition. This is a view of the adjacent access route. A view looking to the east of the public house, northeast. This is the location for the shop. A view of the paddocks to the north of the site. Okay. Your officers consider the, as stated, the proposals will result in the demolition of the existing building and its replacement with 20 flats. I'll take you through the proposed elevations and plans. So that's the ground floor plan, the first floor plan, a visual, this is a visual of the eventual building from the south. So that's a 3D mock-up. The elevations and sections, and a second set of elevation and section drawings. Your officers consider the proposed works are of a satisfactory design and note that the proposals would retain the existing shop and cafe on the site. Members referring to objections, these raise the following matters: that the development's out of character with the local area, that it's in an unsustainable location, that there are very few facilities for the proposed residents, concerns regarding the C3 use classification as opposed to C2 care home, and potential for conversion under that C3 use to general market housing. The visual impact of the new buildings and the required security fencing, modest size of the shop, the impact on local infrastructure and local traffic impact, and the increase in noise and pollution. Of key consideration is that the site already benefits from planning permission for a care home, and therefore, to a certain degree, the impacts of a similar proposal have already been accepted, although in that case, the proposals were for conversion and addition to the existing building, not redevelopment of the site. In respect of this proposal, objections note concerns with the proposed C3 use, and the officer's report highlights that while C3 use includes market housing, officers are satisfied that the need for accommodation for those requiring adult social care can be specifically accommodated by way of condition and Section 106 legal agreement to belt and braces secure that this specific use, not a general market housing use, is what is provided on the site. Your officers note that this approach is consistent with case law for supporting provision of accommodation for this specific need type. Members, it's also worthy of note that this site is outside of settlement, where there is generally a presumption against new residential development. However, in this respect, the need case for the users should be highlighted, as accommodation in an out-of-town location will be less disruptive to those persons with learning disabilities, autism and behavioural needs that need to be accommodated. Moving on to other matters, members are asked to note that the recommendation includes conditions on parking, landscaping and ecology of the site. Turning to the update sheets, I would ask you to note that a slight amendment to wording in respect of users of the building is proposed. An additional condition is also proposed following discussions with the applicant regarding provision of a lit pedestrian footpath. Members, I would ask you to note that there is some concern with whether access to this footpath could be secured via the management company of the adjacent mobile home park, and it's therefore stipulated within the recommended condition that if this is the case, that a connecting access from the mobile home park would not be provided by the management company for their own private commercial reasons. This is set out in evidence when considering discharge of that recommended condition. Finally, turning to drainage matters, You'll note from your update sheet that at present the drainage engineer is not satisfied with the level of information currently supporting the drainage scheme and has raised some queries for resolution prior to recommending a condition to secure the scheme. While officers are satisfied that it is likely that the principle of drainage on this site can be approved based on the detail have been thus far provided, it is therefore recommended that this matter of drainage is delegated back to officers to resolve prior to issue of a decision. Members, therefore, your officer's recommendation remains for approval. And I apologise for this slightly convoluted next part of what I'm about to say. Subject to the conditions in the agenda report and update sheet, completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the use and resolution of drainage matters, together with such conditions as are considered necessary to officers in order to secure proper drainage provision on the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any comments from Highways, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, there isn't at the moment.
Thank you. We have several people who wish to speak. First of all, the Town Council. Would Councillor Watts like to come up to the podium, please? And you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Would you like a warning after 4 minutes? Thank you.
I'm also a resident of
Sorry, sorry, you'll be.
I'm going to turn myself on. Sorry about that. Yeah, the whole idea, we're okay with most of us that live there. That's happening. Our main concern was being able to go to the new shop. And that is, if there isn't a way, we weren't necessarily looking for a lit path, just a way to get to the shop, because we've lost our village shop, and that's it, really. I told you I wouldn't take long.
Thank you. Could you remain for a few minutes to see if any members have any questions?
Oh, of course, yes.
Do members have any questions? Councillor Somner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just want to make sure that are we listening to a presentation on behalf of the Town Council or as a resident? Because it sounds to me like it's a resident, not on behalf of the Town Council.
We have talked about it in the planning committee, the Thatcham Town Council. It's not just, I'm not just coming here as a resident. I am on the planning committee of Thatcham Town Council, and we have discussed it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Mays?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've used that shop for many years when I was coming here in 2011 thereafter. So I know it's a useful little shop. I appreciate that you need it for the residents of the mobile homes and the caravan site next door. And I hope that we are able to retain that shop in its present condition. Do I realise that that is not to be rebuilt? It is to be.
So I think that's a question for.
Yeah, it is a question,
if you
but
could hang on to that.
I want to make sure it's retained.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I then call on the applicant, and we have Warren, Richard, Edwig Selleck and Rosie Palin in person. And do you have, are the other members here?
Yeah, I'm going to speak for the 5 minutes, but if there's any questions, the applicants are available to answer those as well, if that's okay.
Yes, sure. And would you like a warning with 1 minute say to go?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. My name's Rosie Palin and I'm a Principal Planner at ET Planning, and I'm here to represent the applicant. As you have heard, this application is for the partial demolition of the former public house, the Traveller's Friend at Crookham Common. It's proposed to construct buildings on site in order to accommodate a Class C3B use for 18 flats over 2 floors. In addition, an existing building to the rear will be converted to 2 flats with the retention of a small community shop on site. As a way of context, Transforming Developments Limited, the applicant, bought this property in 2021 to convert into supported living accommodation. This is to support people with learning disabilities, autism, and/or complex needs through their core services, which includes outreach. Since purchasing the property, they've worked in partnership with West Berkshire Council and their adult social care team. In February 2022, Paul Coe, who's the Service Director for Adult Social Care at West Berkshire Council, wrote to Transforming Developments Limited, confirming their full support of the proposals for this site, as it makes a significant contribution to addressing the shortfall in this type of supported living accommodation. Adult Social Care have continued to support this development as it helps to meet a strategic and significant need for adult care facilities in West Berkshire, and this has been reiterated through their support for the current application. In terms of the planning history, in January 2021, West Berkshire Council granted full planning permission for a change of use of the existing buildings on site and a new detached outbuilding to provide accommodation for people with autism and learning disabilities, and that fell within the Class C2 residential institution use. In 2022, Transforming Developments Limited started working up the design for this scheme. However, in January 2023, the design team for the project concluded that the existing building and its condition did not warrant it being retained. A structural report was commissioned which highlighted significant shortcomings in the existing building fabric to accommodate the necessary suitable conversion and upgrade in line with building regulations. After discussion with the planning department, it was decided that a second design would be commissioned as it had become uneconomical to convert the property into supported living. On 5th of July last year, they made a second application, which is before you today. As mentioned by the planning officer, this application is for C3B use. The reason for this change from the original application is due to the end client for this project being Inclusion Housing Association. And due to regulatory guidance, they requested that this planning application be submitted under this C3B use that reflected the 18 individual apartments that are planned to be built. Although there were concerns about classifying the development as such, the planning officer has recommended this application for approval subject to the Section 106 being applied to this scheme, which is something that we agree with. With respect to the planning matters of the proposed scheme, it's important to note there are no outstanding objections from the consultation responses received, the exception being from the SUDS team, in which the planning officer has confirmed that this can be overcome, and also the energy team, in which the planning officer has confirmed that the overall public benefit of the scheme overcomes achieving zero carbon, primarily as it would make the scheme unviable. It is acknowledged that the site is situated within the countryside, where new development is usually restricted. However, the proposal does meet the test in policy ADP P1 in helping the rural economy, and on balance has been found acceptable under policy C1 due to the restricted use. Coupled with the redevelopment of previously developed land, this tips the balance in favour of the development within this location. I understand the concerns from members of the public in regards to the future of the proposals due to the C3 nature that's been proposed. However, as set out in the conditions and through the Section 106 obligation, the use of the site will be for only those in need of care in terms of mental health capabilities, and this use will be in perpetuity. This helps to alleviate any local concerns about the use of the site going forward. In the absence of any fundamental reason to indicate otherwise, the planning balance falls firmly in favour of granting permission, and the planning officer has found the proposal acceptable with their professional judgment. This proposed development would contribute towards the identified social need for this type of accommodation. It's a previously developed site and is in a location that's previously been found acceptable.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. As I previously mentioned, Paul Coe, who's the Service Director for Adult Social Care, is fully in support of this application, and this scheme will help to potentially reduce social care costs in the future for the authority. As helpfully summed up by the planning officer in the report, the site will have benefits in physical, social and economic terms, not only for the immediate location, but also within the wider district. The applicants worked closely with the planning officer throughout the determination period, and we agreed to the suggested conditions as set out within the committee report. I trust members are reassured by my comments, and we respectfully ask that you support the application as recommended by our planning officer today. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you remain for questions from members,
Yeah,
please?
of course.
Are there any questions from members, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next call.
Chair.
So, Councillor
Can I
Mace?
speak? Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted, sorry, she's gone.
Yeah.
Can you just confirm, please, that the shop, the existing shop is being retained and not demolished
It's being retained on site.
as it was? as it,
As is, yeah.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for returning. Thank you. Got to call the ward member, Councillor Owen Jeffrey, please. And I think you know the rules, Owen.
I do. I think I do, Chairman. I'm pleased to say I'm going to be very brief indeed. I had previously a number of concerns. The concerns have been whittled away, and it came down to that one concern that there was going to be no effective way of getting from the Park Home site to the site where the site we're talking of, where the shop is going to be. And very kindly, the applicants and our officers have worked together at short notice, for which I apologise, but they've worked together and have come up with a wording that means that whilst we cannot guarantee that the Park Home site manager will agree to it, that if they do, then we can actually have a proper path and indeed a lit path so that the occupants of the Park Home site, the residents, can get to the shop, which is what they want, without having to go round either on the road or in a car or marching down the rather muddy path. So I am pleased to say that the reason that I asked to be here was that I thought that we were going to get different responses. I'm actually completely in favour of it as it stands, and I hope that we can get this through and pass the wire.
Thank you. Would you like to just remain for any questions, please? Are there any questions from members, please? Apparently not. Thank you very much. You okay, Jeff? Thank you. We'll move on then to questions of officers, please. So, have any members got any questions for officers? Councillor Cotton.
It's slightly outside the remit of maybe this committee and its decision, but there was some discussion about speed limits in the local vicinity, and I would just like to put a flag up and note that if the would it be possible to reconsider about lowering the speed limit in front of this this building? Would it be possible, not as part of this condition, but just really asking you, would it be feasible? Is
Gareth?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think for any speed limit review, obviously the parish council, the ward member would need to apply separately. And it obviously will be addressed and looked at appropriately using our speed limit review process.
thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards consideration of removal of PD rights, I haven't spotted it in the document. It doesn't mean it isn't there. It just means I haven't seen it. But has that been considered, and just on the basis of formulating the conversation and debate?
Through you, Chairman. Thank you. I'm just quickly scanning the case officer's report. I'm sorry, I'm not case officer for this application, but I'm not quite as conversant. However, I think you would find that PD rights in relation to a C3B use are limited, and the restriction on change of use class that is imposed is actually the one that relates directly to that use class. But as always, if members felt that a condition restricting permitted development rights was necessary, that could be considered. The only slight concern I have is that the permitted development rights for C3 use are under general residential rather than essentially care home style residential. So in essence, by confining it to the current use, I believe that the permitted development rights fall away anyway.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got just a couple of comments or questions. One thing that particularly struck me from the site visit was the remote location of the site. And obviously, I appreciate the effective guarantees that the shop's going to be there, which I think is particularly important. But I wondered, I also heard at the site visit, there's only a very restricted bus service to this location. I was wonder how the eventual people that are living at this facility, how they can easily transport themselves to other facilities. Are they likely, for example, and I apologise for not knowing this, are many of them likely to be car drivers, for example? And if not, how are they going to get to other services that they may wish to use?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll certainly start on that. Unfortunately, this is a question that could have done with being asked the applicant, I think, rather than officers, because it takes us somewhat outside of the purview of planning proper. However, there is a question there in respect of sustainability of the location. And as your officers report notes, the location is unsustainable. We're not under any illusions that the location is sustainable for this form of development. And ordinarily, we would be looking to site this form of development in accordance with the local plan policies in or adjacent to settlements. However, there is a user demographic here that, for instance, autistic people who have particularly high levels of difficulty with busy, loud environments. And these users, I believe, are quite a high level of dependency on support. So while I can't answer your question through my own knowledge of this case as to whether any of the users would be drivers, my strong suspicion is that they probably would not. In terms of the other criteria, then weighing in the planning balance, your officers consider the lack of sustainability of the location to be a disbenefit of this application, but we weigh the balance positively in favour of the need case in this particular case, and for those specific reasons related to need. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chairman. There's obviously an ongoing conversation to be had with the council SUDS officer. He, she, they are not happy at the moment. And I have no doubt that those concerns can be ironed out in due course. I'm just curious, because I've been to planning meetings before where the SUDS conditions is quite lengthy and quite a lot of thought has been put into what it includes. This one looks a little bit light, and I'm just wondering whether that's a result of those conversations not having gone as far as they could have, or some other reason. And also the condition in particular, which I believe is number 6, it doesn't look like a precondition to me. And if so, I'm hoping, as obviously the conversation unfolds, that can be tightened up. Thanks.
For the benefit of people watching, SUD stands for Sustainable Drainage System.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you like to answer that one?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe that the condition number 6 actually refers to the foul drainage, which is a separate matter from the surface and groundwater drainage for the site. So you're quite right, Councillor Pemberton, that under normal circumstances, we would also have a SUDS condition that stipulated quite a lengthy set of requirements. And that's exactly what this is waiting for, and what officers are asking to be delegated back to us, so that we can have those discussions with the applicant to secure the final pieces of information that demonstrate the drainage scheme is feasible, and wrap that up in an appropriately tightly worded condition to secure delivery of those drainage measures. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that okay? Okay. Any other questions, please? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, Chair, just going back to my original question, I apologise. I probably should have asked that question in a different part of the meeting, but I just would it be possible to ask the applicant if he wants to make any comments at this point?
That would not be in order, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So it is.
So we could suspend standing orders if is it the applicant you wanted to, is willing to answer the question? As long as members are willing.
I think it
to
would be
suspend.
useful. I mean, it would help me in deciding how to, I mean, I think I'm probably generally in favour of this, but it would be useful to understand
Are members
a little more
amenable
about
to
the actual occupants.
Are members amenable to suspend standing orders for a moment?
It's unusual, but I'm happy to propose it, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, are you happy to? Okay.
Is that correct? Wonderful. My name's Warren Richards. I'm the nominated individual with the Care Quality Commission for Transforming Support, part of the applicants group. So to answer your question, the individuals that live in this type of service wouldn't ordinarily be drivers themselves. They would have such support that they would have dedicated mobility cars that could be driven by their support staff that would be with them 24 hours a day, and also might have access to specialist transport either from ourselves or from the authority.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Councillor Somner.
I propose that we reinstate standing.
Oh, thank you. It's good to took the words out of my. And seconded by Councillor Pemberton. Thank you. Okay. Are there? I don't think there's any more questions. So can we move on to debate? Would somebody like to open the debate, please? Councillor Cotton.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a heavy heart because the Travellers Inn, basically Travellers Friend Inn was a very much loved Sunday roast for myself. So maybe I should have declared an interest. But of course, I'm afraid the pandemic, like for many hostelries, actually did for them. I think this is an excellent proposal. It already has the benefit of a condition for care homes. To be honest, I knew the internal part of that very well, and it was not good. And when we looked at it just the other day, it was even worse. You didn't really want to go in and examine the building because the floorboards gone through. And I can imagine the justification for going to a new build, I think, is excellent idea. I think it's very well presented and it's fit for purpose. And I can't see any problems. Especially, I was with Councillor Taylor on this. It did help too. I knew this was done in conjunction with our West Berkshire Social Service Department, but it is helpful to know that because as our officers said, the sustainability of it was of great concern. I think it's only like 2 buses a day if you're lucky. So I'm very much reassured that this will be for the benefit of the residents of the actual building itself. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Somner?
You stopping short of a proposal there, Councillor?
I was just allowing for debate, Councillor.
I have to agree with Councillor Cotton. I think I'm sure it's a site that we've been to previously for different matters. And I think at that point it was recognised as being quite an out of the way location that was generally difficult. And unfortunately, it is one of those things at the moment, isn't it? Where if you don't use your pub, you lose your pub. It's a sad state of affairs that we've got to. But in my area, we've pretty much lost all of them through Calcutta, as you'll know, Councillor Macra. I have to walk over to your area now if I want to go for a drink. It's ridiculous. I think I am mindful of the conditions, and Councillor Pemberton quite rightly pointed out the change on the drainage engineer's point of view, and I think that needs to be factored into it. But I'm actually thinking with those recommended changes that we should put it forward and propose a CRIM.
You're making a proposal?
Happy to make a proposal, Chairman.
So the proposal is the officer's recommendations plus the footpath condition plus removal of I can't think of the term.
Residential permitted development.
Permitted development, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
for me, that would, and I understand that I recognise the concerns of residents around and about the area. For me, that's just a bolt on that gives a little bit more assurance to those in the area, Chairman.
Does that find a second, please? Councillor Cottam.
Sorry.
Was you seconding?
No, he's proposing, not seconding. I was, sorry, Chairman, I was just shy. I thought if there was any further discussion that I wouldn't propose this from the off, but I'm very happy to second Councillor Sumner's proposal, as is laid out in the documents provided by the officers.
Councillor Pemberton.
I'm really sorry, Chair. Could you just repeat what the proposal is? I need to make absolutely sure there's the SUDS precondition in there as well. I can't remember if Councillor Sumner referred to it specifically.
Thank you, Chairman. The proposal then would be as per officer's recommendation, which I shall read out what I read to you earlier on for clarity on that. That would be approval subject to conditions in the agenda report and update sheet, completion of a section 106 legal agreement to secure the use, and resolution of drainage matters together with such conditions as are considered necessary to officers to secure proper drainage provision on site and a restriction on all residential permitted development rights.
Plus the footpath.
That's included within the update sheet, Chairman.
I beg your pardon. So we have a proposal which has been seconded. Could everybody in favour please show, and could you keep your hands raised until I move on? Okay, thank you. Anybody against? I think that was unanimous actually, wasn't it? Okay, thank you very much. So the application is approved with those conditions and with the additional conditions as we've just discussed. Thank you. Can we move on then to the next planning application, which is, so I just pause a moment while people leave. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, move on to the second application, which is 23/02603. The barn at Hawkridge Farm, Bucklebury, near Reading. It's not actually Reading, near Reading. Could I ask Alice Atwood to present the application, please?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, we're going to go through the full application, but there is a listed building consent also associated. The site is the barn at Hawkridge Farm, Bucklebury. The proposal is for internal and external alterations to allow for the change of use of listed building to a dwelling, including the erection of vehicle access, gate and carport, and diversion of definitive footpath. The reason it's here before you today is the council has received more than 10 objections. The officer's recommendation is to be deferred to the development manager to authorise grant a conditional planning permission. The site is within the open countryside within the North Wessex Downs National Landscape. The site is accessed by Chapel Lane, which is an unclassified road. The barn is considered to be within the domestic curtilage of Hawkridge Farmhouse. The blue line shows the extent of the applicant's land, which is 0.3 hectares, located to the south. In question, the red line denotes the area of the site. The land to the north, east and west is agricultural and is in separate ownership. The barn itself is Grade 2 listed and has been used for domestic storage for the past 10 years. It's connected to a linhay in on the west elevation. To the south of the site is Owl House and Hawkwidge Farmhouse, which are 2 dwellings. The site itself is in flood zone 1 and is not within a critical drainage area. Part of the site to the east is within a biodiversity opportunity area. There is also a footpath, Bucklebury 158/1, that runs through the centre of the site. At the site visit, members requested that I obtain a plan from the public rights of way officers, and this is the plan, as you can see on the screen now, which shows the definitive line which runs through the north of the site. Just here, you can see it sort of through the middle of the amenity. It runs through the middle of the domestic curtilage. Members will be able to see from the proposed block plan that this footpath is to be diverted slightly more to the north. And the applicants have already applied through a process called a section 247 to divert the path. There have been no valid objections to that order, and it's with the Department of Transport to be finalised. If members resolve to grant permission, the diversion will be finalised. We have proposed, in case of challenge, that a condition be attached that the dwelling will not be occupied until the footpath has been formally diverted, to make sure there will be enough private amenity space for future occupiers. The property is proposed to be a 4-bedroom dwelling. This is the ground floor plans. You can see there's 2 bedrooms on the ground floor with an open plan living, dining room, kitchen. Bedrooms 3 and 4 is in the roof, but then there's also a void. That's the roof plan. There's going to be 4 small windows added into this proposal, but largely the proposal makes use of existing openings that are already on the barn. There will be obscure glazing on the south elevation to protect the future occupiers. On the this window here, that it will be to a height of 1.7 metres.
Sorry, Chairman, just what was 1.75 metres?
The obscure glazing on this window.
Thank you.
And with the obscure glazing in place, officers feel that there would not be harmful impact on amenity to the occupiers of Owl House or the occupiers of Hawkwidge Farmhouse. These are the east and west elevations. Again, they remain largely the same. You can also see the carport here, which is partly subterranean. This shows the carport better, and it will have a green roof and will assimilate into the surrounding landscape. Electric charging point will be secured by condition. Highways have confirmed that the parking is compliant with policy C1, and they are content with the highways arrangements. So this is the north elevation of the barn. Let's take a look. This is a far-ranging view of the north elevation from the surrounding landscape. This is the northeast elevation. This is the east elevation, south, west elevation. This is the inside of the barn. Officers considered the barn to be redundant of its original use, and which is agriculture. Essentially, it's been used for domestic storage for excess of 10 years. And so it complies with C4. This shows the relationship between the end of the barn and Owl House. This is just showing Hawkridge Farm on the left and Owl House on the right. This is Hawkridge Farm house, which is approximately 12.5 meters away from the barn. This is Owl House. This is the view from Owl House towards the barn. This is a view of the Lynn Hay barn looking north. This is Lynn Hay looking northwest. This is a view of the Lynn Hay looking south. This is the proposed site entrance. And this is the site entrance viewing up from the north. And this is the site entrance viewing from the south. Officers have received no formal objections from consultees. Officers have received an objection from the parish council, which is Bucklebury, and we have received a neutral representation from the neighbouring parish of Frilsham. The application itself has had 82 representations, 48 in support and 34 objections. It's gone up slightly more since I wrote my report, so that's the official number from tonight. The policies to be considered here is APP1, ADPP5, CS14 and CS19, and also C1 and C4. We believe that the development is compliant with C4, which means there's a presumption in favour of the development. All technical issues have been overcome during the course of the application or are now going to be dealt with via planning conditions. The proposed use of the barn is considered to be the optimal viable use of the heritage asset. While the conservation officer is not supportive of obscure glazing, they do consider it to give less than substantial harm to the significance of the barn. Therefore, they agree that if the public benefit outweighs that harm, we view the public benefits to be securing the optimal viable use for the heritage asset, which will secure the long-term conservation of the barn. It will secure the barn for enjoyment of users of the footpath. It will make a small contribution to the West Berkshire housing land supply, and will bring back into use a redundant building. So we consider the public benefits would be on balance outweigh the less than substantial harm caused significance of the building. When considering all these matters, officers have reached a finely balanced decision of recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any comments from Highways, please?
No comments at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have several people who wish to speak. First of all, Bucklebury Parish Council. Could I ask Councillor David Southgate to come forward to the podium, please? And you have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning when you're getting towards the end?
Yes, please.
About 1 minute?
Yes, please.
Well, go ahead, thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, West Berkshire councillors and officers of West Berkshire Council. My name is David Southgate and I am Vice Chair of Bucklebury Parish Council. I was asked at our last meeting to represent Bucklebury Parish Council at this forum as the Parish Council continues to object to this development. Whilst Bucklebury Parish Council is sympathetic to a planned future use of this listed and biddable barn, it does have significant concerns about the proposal. This is a very pretty remote site in open, unspoilt countryside on a very small country lane. The presence of the partly submerged carport with cars parked inside and out on the new driveway will have an adverse impact on this rural area. Bucklebury Vision, our VDS, has been accepted as by West Berkshire Council as supplementary planning guidance. And it states that any development should be in keeping with the rural nature of the area and its designation as an AONB. And the natural beauty of the landscape, visual quality and amenity of the area should be conserved and enhanced. It also recommends that bland car parking areas to frontages should be avoided. We believe that the VDS is not being followed in this application. The creation and use of increased illumination with such large windows, both south and particularly the north side overlooking fields and woodland, will result in a significant light spillage at night, affecting the dark skies of the national landscape and resulting in disturbance to wildlife. We believe this to be contrary to policy ADPP5. An external lighting plan should be a condition of any approval. Chapel Lane is very narrow and in places steep, bendy, high-banked single track road, subject to the national speed limit. Our Bucklebury Parish Council 500,000 car SID monitoring shows that we have significant speed issues within the parish. One of the officers here present is a regular recipient of that data and will be able to validate that. We believe any vehicles reversing in or out of the drive would face a significant hazard as a consequence of that traffic that is going above the national speed limit. Bucklebury believe access to the site for large vehicles is going to be difficult given the size of the roads involved and the available space. Conversion of the barn will result in windows from the barn looking directly into the farmhouse and partially into the owl house and vice versa. Privacy for both existing dwellings will be significantly reduced. The solution to use obscured glazing will have a significant adverse visual impact on this rural area and at odds with the traditional appearance of the barn. Those are comments as per the West Berkshire Conservation email included in the pack. Much of the immediate area around the barn drains into the pond adjacent to the Chapel Lane. After heavy rain, there is frequent flooding of Chapel Lane. Concern is raised that the additional drive and partially submerged carport will increase flooding to this area. Concerns have been raised about foul and stormwater drainage. A full drainage scheme and plan should be conditional of any approval. Finally, the site is not in a sustainable location. There is no public transport available, and the application will result in more cars on this small, winding and hilly lane. The nearest shop is 1.5 miles away. On this basis, Bucklebury Parish Council continues with its original decision of object. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you remain for any questions from members, please? Are there any questions, please, members? Apparently not. So thank you very much. Can I therefore call upon the people who are objecting, Russell Meadows and Christine Dunn. Would you like to come to the podium, please? You have 5 minutes between you. Would you like to, how would you like to divide up your time?
Yes, sir. Could you give me a call at 3 minutes 30?
So
I'm going to do 3.5 minutes.
3.5 minutes.
And my friend's going to do 1.5.
That's acceptable, is it? Yeah. Okay, thanks. Please to begin. You may start.
Chair, good evening. My name is Russell Meadows. My family and I live at the Owl House, Hawkridge Farm. To be clear, this application will blight our home due to reduced privacy, amenity, and increased noise, plus the light pollution from the huge windows that are proposed. The local wildlife will be affected, and what was a farmyard cluster will become overdeveloped. To conserve this 500-year-old barn, the applicant is proposing to lever off all the external cladding and roof battens plus tiles. The external cladding will be unsuitable to be reused as it is attached to the frame with rusted nails and will break when levered off. So in the interest of conservation, he's proposing damage to the existing historic fabric on a massive scale, contrary to C4 number 6. The visibility splay from the proposed gateway is not achievable to the north and will create a dangerous access. Highways have confirmed to me in writing that the highway boundary is a continuation of the fence line running beside Chapel Lane. On the 4th of July, Highways also confirmed to me in writing that my newly erected fence beside my gateway does not encroach into the highways controlled land and is legal. If we refer to the proposed block diagram 2038 revision K, this shows two splay lines which are 33 metres and 50 metres. These splay lines are clearly hit my new fence and then cross onto my land.
Had your 3.5 minutes. Could you conclude, please?
That's 3.5 minutes.
No, it's not 3.5.
I'm sorry, mate. Sorry.
I thought you wanted to be.
Is my time still going?
Sorry, I thought you need to be.
So if we-
straight out, you want to speak.
The gentleman wants to speak for 3 minutes 30.
Sorry, that is.
I apologise.
That's okay.
Carry
Have
on.
you stopped my clock for a moment?
Yes, I thought.
Thank you.
Okay.
Shall I start? I'm slightly lost what I've got. So referring to that block diagram, these splay lines clearly hit my new fence and then cross onto my land. And using the scale on that diagram, the 50-metre splay line crosses my new fence at 0.8 metres from the highway boundary. The splay is then significantly compromised from this point onwards and is unachievable in perpetuity. The fence is erected under permitted development rights. It does not exceed 1 metre in height and forms no boundary with the listed barn. It is isolated and I may well replace it with a hedge. The proposed gigantic sealed cesspool of 45,200 litres is to be positioned near the footpath and the road and is a type that is banned in Scotland due to environmental risk. Once the barn is inhabited, the cesspool will require 24 empties a year with an 18-tonne lorry. The occupiers of the barn and the walkers will be exposed to its foul smell. This is not sustainable. The proposed turning head will become the de facto car park. It has no stipulated dimensions or shape on any of the published block diagrams as claimed. The carport roof is almost 5 feet above the sloping ground and is visually intrusive. The pond and the surrounding area will be an overdevelopment of this rural bucolic area, contrary to C4 number 5 and also the Buckleby Vision document version 10. The visual appearance of the barn is very important. The doors should remain closed as they have for 99% of their life. Being bolted open dramatically changes the character and outside appearance of the barn. At night, this barn will be lit up like a beacon. Proposed obscure lighting will hardly reduce light spill. The character, fabric and historic interest of this building will be changed, contrary to C4 number 6. This applicant does not enhance the AONB, which by law must protect it. It damages it severely. It must be rejected.
Okay, thank you.
Christine Dunn, local resident. What were 2 dwellings in 2020 are to become 3 dwellings and 13 bedrooms and upwards of 13 cars. This is overdevelopment. A new gravelled car park to the pond's edge with its cars, a semi-submerged carport, which has a roof of nearly 5 feet above the sloping ground, a cesspool the size of a bus. This is urban sprawl, contravening policy C4 because it affects the rural character and will be visually intrusive. The Conservation Officer states large areas of obscure glazing synonymous with domestic suburban properties will be visually striking. My view is there is significant threats to the dark skies and light pollution will be greatly increased. The 4 barn doors will become massive areas of glazing. The proposed obscured glazing will not stop a significant amount of light pollution emitting from the north and south sides. This application contravenes the North Wessex Downs AONB, National Landscape Management Plan 2019-2024, which states by law, all development must conserve and enhance the character, qualities and heritage of this protected landscape. There is no way this application conserves or enhances this tranquil rural area. Thank you, committee.
Thank you very much. So could you remain and perhaps if the Mr. Meadows, could we join for any questions from members, please? Any Councillor Somner?
Thank you, Chairman. You both spoke about the cesspit size of it and the removal of the waste. Can you just confirm for me what the existing dwellings use? Are they mainline or do they have a?
So the existing dwellings, I have a septic tank, which the Owl House owns, and it's on the other side of Chapel Lane. I allow Hawkridge Farm under a covenant to also use that septic tank. But that septic tank is not available for this barn conversion, and by covenant, it's not allowed to use it. It should also be noted that if it was allowed to use it, septic tank would not be capable of dealing with that extra 4 bedrooms.
Okay, thank you. So just to expand on that, Chair, if I may. So at the moment, you would still be using the same sort of methodology for emptying that. They were still talking vehicles coming in to empty it, are we?
So the Owl House and Hawkridge Farm at the moment use a septic tank, which is emptied every few years. This proposed dwelling is using a sealed cesspool because it does not have access to a septic tank, and the grounds of this proposal would not be able to take a septic tank.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Not being an expert in cesspool capacity and sort of how they're emptied, etc., can I just ask where you're getting the figures of 24 empties a year from, please?
Okay, so these figures, I have used the guidelines of one person is 150 litres per day. And for 4 people, this 4-bedroomed proposal, that will be 600 per day for this dwelling. If you multiply that by 365, you come up with 219,000 litres. I have used an 18-ton lorry, which may or may not go into this location, this small single track lane. But if it did, that could potentially remove 9,100 litres per empty. So I divided 219,000 by 9,100 litres, and that comes up with the number 24.
Yep, okay. Any other questions, please? Councillor Mays?
Yes, I was looking through the drawings and I saw a level referring to the pond. Is the level of the pond the water level or the just the high level from the water table in that area?
So the level of the pond is fed by all the roofs, Hawkridge House and the Owl House, all the guttering feeds into that pond. That pond is the lowest spot in this area. So the pond is also fed by drainage, water draining down the road. Everything goes into that pond. In the winter, in the rainy season, that pond floods every year. And I submitted pictures in my objection of the flooding, and it's extensive. The flooding will be possibly 6 to 10 inches high in the road.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on then to questions for officers, please. Do it. Members have any questions for officers? I beg your pardon. Supporters. I'm got to call Kate Russell, please, and I apologise for trying to move on accidentally. And you have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning towards it? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm a firm believer that this barn should be restored, and during the next few minutes I'd like to explain why. As well as being a member of the West Berkshire Countryside Society, I'm an antique furniture restorer. I'm West Dean trained, a centre of excellence for restoration and conservation, and I worked closely with the Wheel and Down and Living Museum in Chichester, which is it's an important understanding about old buildings. I live in West Berkshire and I know the unoccupied barn well. I regularly drive past it on my way to my workshop in Hampstead Norreys. Also, my brother is a frequent user of the barn in the winter months to practice archery. The barn in question is listed, so conservation and restoration will be controlled by the detailed planning conditions attached to the listed building consent. The end result will be positive, and the barn will be an asset to the surrounding areas. I'm aware of the NIMBY building development in rural areas of natural beauty, but this is not a new build. This is an old timber barn, which if left will deteriorate, especially with the wet winters that we are having. In 2020, there was a planning application to convert the barn into a resident property. It only had 3 objectors, and at the time, the neighbour appeared happy with the idea, as he was not one of those 3. Even though there were doubts raised by a third party over certain things, while the application was withdrawn, it was clear to the current owners that the conservation officer supported the principle of converting the barn to a house. This must also have been clear to the neighbour at the time the site was sold. So when buying the property, the current owners had no inkling that there would be, in principle, any issue in converting the barn at a later date. Why now, when the original plans have been improved and all the technical areas have been addressed to the satisfaction of specialists, is the neighbour objecting? The current owner have bought this rural property, which is semi-detached and has a shared drive with the neighbour, with the expectations of making it a mark on their own property, which most of us do when we buy somewhere new. However, this whole process has been stressful and very personal. The current barn owners' plans are sympathetic, sensitive, and based on thorough research. They've gone to great lengths to have comprehensive specialist reports done in many areas, from the newts in the pond to the owls in the barn, and they've also had specialist historical timber build people in to help see how it goes. So, number 1, there are no newts in the pond, however the pond is staying. Number 2, the owl nests closer to the neighbour's house than the barn, and the West Berkshire Ecological Officer had no comment regarding the impact of the proposal of the barn conversion. 3, on the topic of light pollution, it will be lessened once the development is completed. At present, the barn is lit with high-powered, high-level fluorescent tubes. The barn is used in the evening. Once developed, softer lightings and curtains will make a positive difference. And also there are windows at the front overlooking the field will not be changed. Flooding. The underground carport will slow down rainwater runoff as it will go to a soakaway rather than onto the road. Thus, this will improve the current situation. The carport. The carport will be primarily underground with a living green roof, so it will not be that visible from the landscape or from the view from the road. And more importantly, will not upset the neighbour using the shared drive. So to sum up, this barn is currently used for archery, storage, and a bit of DIY. There could be so much more, and indeed it should be. We need to cherish these old buildings that are important to the landscape. Much like the furniture I restore, they tell a story of how things were in the past. Restoring and using them as residential purposes is a positive outcome, not a negative one, and will allow these properties to continue to be looked after and loved, promoting their use as homes rather than unused sheds. The trade people involved in the restoration will be skilled, passionate, and care about their craft work, and they work to a high standard. Councillors should jump at the opportunity to support and repair and restore listed buildings. It's far cheaper to build new ones, and less people are restoring old ones. I really hope common sense will prevail. This barn is listed, therefore it should be and will be restored sympathetically and with care, well loved, and its use prolonged. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you remain for any questions, please?
Yeah.
Do members have any questions for the supporter? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just with regards, I'm just trying to picture the carport against the pond, against flooding. It feels to me like it's likely to take more flooding than the pond does. Can you just clarify for me with regards? Sorry, do you want?
Yeah, I think you're going to be able to answer that better because they've got the technical drawings for that.
Okay, I'll hold the question to the next one.
Is that all right? Sorry.
Thank you. Any other questions for members? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry.
So could I call on the applicant, and I'm not sure whether the applicant or agent actually, Richard Beasley and Lisa Jackson. And you have, sorry, are you the applicant?
I'm the applicant.
Richard's the applicant, I'm Lisa Johnson, the agent.
And you both like to speak, would you?
It's our time, 2.5 minutes each, please.
2.5 minutes each, okay.
Have a warning at that interval, yeah?
You want a warning at 2.5?
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Right. Ready when you are, Mr. Chipman. Okay, good evening. My name's Richard, I'm the applicant. My wife and I moved into the farmhouse 2 years ago, attracted by its beautiful location, and have been busy making this our home. We have integrated ourselves into the local community. I ring bells at Yattendon and Hampstead Norwich Church, cycle with the Newbury Road Club. My wife arranges flowers for Filfrin Church. We both sit on the local fake committee and are regular volunteers at the pensioners' lunches. We host beehives in the barn garden, and the barn is used by the local archery club for indoor practice. Apart from some urgent repairs, the barn has been largely untouched since the 60s and now needs significant repair and modernisation to ensure its future. We quickly realised that the barn was too large, an outbuilding for domestic use, and none of the uses we have made of it will sustain the significant investment needed to repair the original timber structure. The barn, with no farmland attached and an unsuitable design for modern farming needs, is not viable for agriculture. We considered commercial use, but agree with the planning report that these are not suitable and they would be more damaging to the listed barn. We want to sympathetically convert the barn into a dwelling, as this is the only realistic future for the barn, and we've worked hard with our team of specialists to resolve all the technical issues. We have uncovered significant and informative history on the farmstead. For example, the historic evidence that we know the midstray, which is the structure on the north side of the barn with large windows, was removed in the 1800s and then reinstated in the 1900s. And at some point, there were full height doors present on the north face to match those on the southern elevation. Over the time, this barn has been altered and repaired and is not in its original form. It was only listed relatively recently in 1983, so much change had occurred before that time. It is nothing like the exceptional quality of the totally unaltered Grade 1 listed barn of Great Coxwell that it has been compared to by objectors. We've also listened to feedback from the local parish, objectors and consultees, and from West Berks Council, as well as considering the impact on our neighbours. The design has evolved through that process. And in response to this, for example, arranging the living area of the barn at the eastern and furthest away from their home, preserving more of the original timber frame, and introducing obscure glazing to protect the privacy of both the barn occupants and our house.
Draw your remarks to a conclusion, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was involved in the first planning application in 2020 when the then owners proposed the conversion of this barn to a dwelling, and there was support from the Conservation Officer at that stage. Following the change of ownership, the current owners have dedicated a significant effort and worked with the professional officers of the council to confirm that the conversion is compliant with the most critical planning policy, in this case, policy C4. It meets all the criteria and can be completed with causing less than substantial harm to the listed building, with no harm to protected species, including the bats, owls, and the great crested newts. Importantly, the planning officers have considered in great detail whether the conversion on balance will create a dwelling that has sufficient size and quality of amenity space and privacy for the existing and future occupants. They've considered safe access, adequate parking, drainage that will deal with the proposed runoff and not cause further harm elsewhere. All of those technical concerns and all of the points that the objectors have made have been addressed fully, and there are no outstanding technical or policy objections to the application the officer has outlined. In particular, I would note that the proposed surface water proposal, and this perhaps will answer Councillor Richard Sumner's question, is that the interception of the new soakaway and below ground storage will intercept the runoff at the point at which it falls before it reaches the road. Currently, it comes straight off the roof and will go to the lowest point, which is the road. So that new underground storage, which has been sized for extreme events, including the allowance for climate change, will slow the water coming off this building than its current status. And of course, it has been designed to avoid the water falling back to the carport with a drainage design that has been submitted in detail. In terms of the issues of the cesspool, as Councillor Cotton said on the site visit, these are matters for building control, and the calculation the objector has made does not consider the lowest water use that is required in technical building control and the potential for grey water, which would reduce the amount in the tank. The draft diversion order for the footpath has been made by the Secretary of State, and if the application is approved today, the diversion is confirmed. This matter has been therefore taken out of your hands, and you can confidently proceed knowing that the diverted footpath will accommodate the proposed parking solution. Planning officers have worked hard to scrutinise every aspect of this proposal and have considered all issues in the comprehensive report. We would respectfully request that you support the work of your officers in concluding that the scheme meets the planning policy requirements, in particular C4, and secures a long-term sustainable future for this important building, and therefore would you kindly confirm approval tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your concluding remarks seem to last a very long time. Do members have any questions, please? Sorry.
I have two. Firstly, see what I couldn't find on the plans. What are the actual heights of the bedrooms and the ceilings?
You forgive me, I didn't draw the plans, it was the architect. I couldn't tell you. I would hope the officers have a scale rule and could put a scale rule and tell you the height. I think there'll be a restricted head height.
Fine, I'll ask
because
that.
they'll be into.
I'll ask that one later.
Yeah,
the other one is considering. No, I think there's a general agreement amongst the community of dark skies. How do you think your design fits in with the light and effects of the light on the actual inhabitants, on the surrounding inhabitants and area?
Understand. Clearly, the officers have considered this, and they have considered that a planning condition will deal with external lighting. Clearly, the issue is internal lighting.
Yes.
But what I would ask, I would remind you, on the visit, you saw the very large openings that exist to the north. Already, they're glazed openings, and the barn does have high bay fluorescent lights that can be used at night, and obviously in the winter will be on significantly. So in terms of fallback, that's pretty significant. I would suggest that domestic lighting would be much more sympathetic, and as the supporters suggested, people tend to use curtains as well. So I think in reality, the suggestion that the harm would be greater, I think is wrong. I think this would improve the situation in terms of spilt light from the current unabated fluorescent lights in the large windows.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I've just got a question relating to the conservation officer's comments, and he particularly focuses on the impact of the obscure glazing. I barely know what obscure glazing is, so I'm totally honest. But have you considered any alternatives to that, or
yes,
ways in which that issue could be overcome?
Yeah, there's a tension there, isn't there? Because clearly the front-to-front distances are within the standards that you would normally expect in a front-to-front distance. So you would expect some overlooking between properties. I know that the applicants would not be concerned with clear glazing. Perhaps it is the strength of objection that has led the need to put in obscure glazing in this instance. Although the views are oblique, they're not direct. There's a distance of 12.5 metres. That's considerable, and it is very difficult. And I think that the closest window is a high level. You're not going to be able to see out of it. So the obscure glazing is only on the largest parts. The first one, the western side, is a stairwell, so it's not an inhabited room. And you could take the attitude, let's not have obscure glazing, if you didn't think it was necessary. But I think your officers would advise you it was. And that was how we started with this proposal. We didn't think the overlooking was that bad, and the applicants were content with it. And in terms of the eastern bay, we've looked at 1.7 metres, so that's just to eye height, so that the top part is open glazing. An obscure glaze, and the conservation officer will deal with the detail of that. You'd expect a really simple, matte, flat etching effectively, rather than some of those stipply 1960s things that you used to get. That's what I would anticipate here, a very simple flat glazing. And I've seen it used very effectively in barn conversions elsewhere where glazing privacy is required.
Okay,
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the various drawings I've got in front of me, do you intend to remove all the tiles or reuse them all or reuse some of them or make
I have to tell you, sadly, they are not all original tiles.
No,
as
I
we
realise
pointed
that.
out, this was only listed in 1983. A number of the tiles have been replaced at some period. I don't know when.
They're plain tiles.
They are plain tiles, but they would be reused.
And they're nailed or pegged?
I think they're mostly nailed because a lot of the rafters have been replaced as well.
Yeah, I think on the site visit, it was pointed out. But
I couldn't go to that.
The rafters are modern
have been
cut.
replaced.
They're not pole rafters.
Okay. On the same subject with the roof, does the barn at the moment have a gutter to downpipes, or is it just straight off the tile?
Gutter.
Straight into a gutter?
Yes.
So that's not going to change?
No.
No, okay.
No change there at all.
So I don't really think that's a planning issue.
You get more water coming down, it's going to make up a...
Yeah, no, I can see why you're asking it. And there's absolutely
If
no
it's there,
change
it's the same
from the
as
current
it was
situation.
before, then there's no change. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Got a call on the local member, Chris Reid, please. And you also have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning towards the end?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman.
1 minute.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, as ward councillor, I have taken a personal, on balance view of this application. And even though I am normally in favour of rural development, I'm afraid I am not in favour of this one. I have several concerns on the application: privacy, suitability in A and B, environmental impact, impact of adding another access to a very twisty, turny, single track road, regular flooding during winters, whether it is really generally redundant, as the owner does have some interest, I believe, in the agricultural land close to the site to the south of the residents of Hawkridge Farm. Further, as to the redundancy, as stated under policy C4, I see on similar application at the very same barn in 2020, there are agricultural implements in the photos. A Massey Ferguson 135. My father had two. My father's a farmer's son, by the way. Very viable tractors and much sought after as yard tractors and by smallholders due to their significant horsepower and small size used by many smallholders today. The question is to be asked, has the barn been advertised in the agricultural press or let or rent at reasonable market rates to prove its redundancy? Also, as it is listed, it should be maintained by the owner regardless of use. The supporting statement states this barn is in good order and good repair. Any smallholder or small business would be delighted to rent this. Its conversion to a residence will reduce the access to such a useful barn space for the rural economy, or worse, cause another modern barn to be erected in the Pang Valley. As WBC policy C4 states, the applicant can prove the building is generally redundant and as a change to a residential use and will not result in subsequent request for replacement building. I also see comments like historic streets on the design statement. This is not a street, it's a farmyard. The applicant is proposing to start a street in an area that is quite unique for the Pang Valley, let alone West Berkshire. I've also raised an observation that there is a public footpath that runs parallel to the north of this property that will run through the groundworks and the underground car park proposed. Squeezing the footpath to the side of the subterranean carport, as proposed in the application, will definitely not enhance the amenity or experience of visitors to the beauty of the Pang Valley. Also, I am amused by the percolation tests. They never seem to be completed when the fields are flooded, or always when there's dry weather, which the field to the north regularly does flood during winter. The site will flood and require regular pumping out, requiring more large lorries to come down the single track road, in my humble opinion. In my humble opinion, this is a speculative development application, brings no value to the area other than yet another executive residence in the high price band bracket, and does not necessarily secure the character of the barn, of which there are few examples left in the ward of Bucklebury that have not already been demolished or converted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Would you like to remain for any questions? Thank you. Any questions for the local councillor, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we can move on to questions for officers. Sorry to be premature before. Who would like to, any questions? Councillor Cottam?
Yes, one of my major concerns, and having some experience of Isolux drawings of lighting spreading throughout industrial buildings, admittedly, but I'm concerned, do we have these drawings showing the light patterns that will be created by the external and internal lightings?
Chairman, if I may, thank you. So what at the moment the barn is in domestic use, and they can, and it already has these big openings, so there is already light spill. The ecologist did have a look at the light spill, but you have to take into account what's already there and how they can already use it. But we have put in a condition that will require the applicants to submit a lighting scheme that is sensitive to biodiversity. And the ecologist was very happy with this, and they don't believe that there's going to be any harm caused to protected species from light spill from the building. So we haven't been in this, we haven't had plans submitted of what the Isolux is now and what it will be later, but we have a condition in place that will protect the protected species from the light spill.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can you strengthen that? I mean, can you have, for example, I assume that we're going to have any external lighting will be facing downwards for a start, but also I'm concerned that if you have wrongly or badly positioned lighting within the actual barn itself, it will worsen the situation. The fact that they have fluorescents, which are radiating light in 360 degrees, can be replaced by a spotlight, which will be putting all of the output light in one direction. And if these are actually placed in the direction of the windows, there will be a major increase in lighting through. Also, just on that, there should be, for example, LEDs, which is actually supplied LED lighting into farms. So I do know somewhat about this, having done lighting plans myself. They should be a consideration, should be, for example, with yellow warm lighting rather than the blue lighting, which is actually very intense and very distracting and would in fact actually attract animals to it as such. So I'm disconcerted that we're not looking for an improvement. Yes, there are some old fluorescent yellow lights there. I doubt that they're left on all night, because I know farmers wouldn't do it because they consume a lot of power. But I am very, our dark skies policy, I feel that, could be not respected enough.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to come back on this first of all, and if necessary, then my planning officer can add comments. However, members, I am a little concerned that it would be quite easy to disappear off onto what is, in my view, something of a red herring here. The barn's current use is ancillary residential, which admittedly involves lighting intermittently being turned on. However, you've heard from the local ward member in respect of a potential future agricultural use of the barn. Now, while I consider that, contrary to the local ward member, somewhat unlikely, given the location and amount of viable farmland actually surrounding that barn, were this barn to be put into an agricultural use, which I should confirm to members wouldn't require planning permission because all land is deemed agricultural by default under planning, then one could end up with a very significant level of lighting with zero control applied to it because there's no control within the planning history for the site regarding lighting. And there's no requirements for application for planning permission for lighting. And that, if it was to be put to a genuine agricultural use, could be 24 hours a day in and out of the building, resulting in considerable large amounts of lighting overspill if it was to be used, for example, for agricultural storage, machine storage, the sort of uses that one might expect a barn of that size to be put to. Compared to that level of lighting, which, as I say, would be completely uncontrolled, a residential use would, in my view, result in considerably less overspill of lighting, particularly with the conditions that have been recommended in respect of external lighting. And I should also remind members that it is important to consider reasonableness within conditions, and that planning conditions are not able to be overly prescriptive. So if we approve a residential use, then the impact of that residential use is in part lighting overspill from internal residential lights. But members, I would advise you to consider, I would strongly advise you to consider that by comparison to a considerably more intensified agricultural use that the building could be put to, and to consider also whether realistically in a site with an existing residential use for two of the surrounding buildings, there's likely to be an additional level of lighting overspill generated. And members, I should finally point out, and sorry for being very long-winded on this answer, that this is an on balance officer's recommendation where officers are minded to support the ongoing viable use of the building and therefore accept some undue impacts generated by that use, because we consider that those impacts are less than the building potentially falling into some level of disuse and disrepair through the lack of financial viability of ongoing maintenance of the building. Now, as has been pointed out, yes, that is a matter that is legally tied to the applicant, but in realism, in real life, we've seen a lot of derelict buildings across the district fall into disrepair. So members, that hopefully gives you a bit of an insight into the balanced considerations that officers have made with regard to matters like lighting.
Thank you, Chairman. I would agree to disagree, because actually the usage of these barns I'm very, very familiar with, and they would actually have a motion detector which would come on and go off as the vehicles came in and out. But so there would not be lights on all day. The farmers don't want to waste the power. And I can assure you, I've seen many, many of these structures, and I still we're supposed to be enhancing the A&B and looking after our dark skies, but thank you for the explanation. I do have a different view. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, could I just quickly add, sorry, I just want to add that this is a listed building, so any additional light fixtures that affect the significance would need listed building consent. I also draw your attention to condition 16, which deals with lighting strategy for external lighting in the area of outstanding natural beauty. What this means is the applicant would have to submit a lighting strategy for zone 1, which is in compliance with the guidance given to us by the North Wessex Downs. So, you know, they would be protecting the dark skies by this condition.
Thank you for that clarification, Chairman. I would just ask, would that apply to internal lighting as well?
It wouldn't apply to internal lighting, but we have to consider that there is already existing internal lighting, and by granting this permission, you would have more control on the existing lighting situation, but we can't control the internal lighting of the building.
Thank you. That's a great clarification, and I take that on board.
Any other questions for officers, please? In that case, would someone like to start the debate?
I'll try.
Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Cotton. Not straightforward at all, is it, this one? I can understand the concerns. I can understand the desire to develop. And lighting seems to be coming to the fore as the primary issue. I'm not sure it is. And I see two conditions within the list of 21. 21 conditions, by the way, for a single dwelling is considerable, I think, in the years I've been sitting on this committee. But it shows the concern of officers, in my view, to make sure that it's right and make sure that things don't go ahead before they're ready, that they are, I think, by default, an opportunity to reinforce their position and to continue to reinforce that. I am concerned by the size of the lane, but we live in a rural area. There are narrow lanes everywhere. And you have to say, if it was a working farm, there'd be some pretty hefty vehicles going up and down that lane regardless. And I can't rule that out. It may be dismissed, but you can't rule it out. It's a fact. We've seen it in countless applications that are in these sort of locations before. You get sizable vehicles. It's what happens. Our bin trucks have to go up and down the roads apart from anything else. They're not small. I'm going to invite other colleagues to come in and join me on debate instead of hiding behind their monitors. I think I know which way I'm leaning, but I'm going to keep my powder dry for the moment, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had a very detailed look at the drawings before us. I was quite impressed with the actual architectural changes, the insulation and the detail of the materials to be used. I had one doubt about the use of cork in the insulation area, because I have had my house done in this way. I've had a new roof, a new tiled roof, replaced this 100-year-old building which needed some work on it. I had insulation at rafter level and insulation below the rafters. I also had the tiles completely replaced. It was part of an extension as well, so it was a force majeure. I had to replace many of the tiles, but we did try to use many, but we did find it very, very difficult. So I would suspect that this barn would lose many of its existing tiles, and you'd have a lot to replace, which will be expensive, of course. Generally, I'm in favour of the actual building works on it, but I am concerned about the effluent removal and the drainage aspects. On the drawing I was referring to earlier, I can see that the pond level is given as, I think it's in 88.3, which is, if it's the surface water of the pond, then that's well below the car park. But otherwise, if it's the bed level of the pond, then I'd be a bit concerned with the flooding of the actual subterranean car park and the ramp to it. So I've got mixed feelings about this design, and I'm going to hold my powder dry as well, I think, on voting to see how it goes. Thank you.
Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, yes, like the last two speakers, I also have mixed feelings about this. As I've read through this report 2 or 3 times over the last week, and each time I see things that draw me in one direction, and then in the next section, you know, perhaps draw me the other way. I mean, I think it's also, I know it's perhaps a very crude way of looking at it, but I do note that there are actually more people supporting this application. If we look at the numbers of supporters versus the number of those objecting, though I appreciate that's probably not a proper way to look at it, but you know, it's nonetheless, it's in the report, so it does perhaps also steer us in a particular direction. I think my inclination is drawing me towards supporting the application on balance, because I think there's, you know, raised some issues earlier around the glass windows, for example. I'm concerned there are issues raised by the objector, you know, regarding the you know, how the number of visits that are going to be required to empty water tanks and so on. But I think my inclination is towards supporting it.
Councillor Cotton.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm leaning in the other direction because I think the major effect on the surroundings is the light pollution that will be put out. I think it's a red herring to say that industrial use or agricultural use, this would generate more lighting. It wouldn't. I've been into many farmyards, and they, you know, to save electricity is a farmer's main raison d'etre. So they'd have motion lights. So no, I think it actually, agricultural use might actually reduce the amount of light that would be exposed, just down to efficiency and economy. I can't see, and it may be unreasonable to ask for backlighting to be used within the bedrooms. I presume this is going to be. And if we can't ask that, or we can't implement that, then I don't think we should go ahead. Because I think our dark skies policy is sacred, quite frankly, especially in an A or an B. And we should resist adding more to that. To say that, oh yeah, there's some fluorescent lights in there. Well, they're a shadow of what the light that actually will exist in an occupied room. I mean, you're talking about, you know, in a barn, you're talking about 50 lux. So, you know, if we want to go down to deep figures, and in a bedroom, it's going to be about 250 to 300 lux. And if those lights are pointing towards the window, that will spread. Okay, I mean, one thing about LED lights is they project light in one direction. They're not like fluorescent lights who, when they say, oh, well, that'll put out 150 lumens, it's actually spread over 360 degrees. So maybe a quarter of it's going in that direction. Whereas an LED, if you say it's 200-300 lumens, it all goes in that direction. And that's why I am so concerned. And if we don't have the power to control that or consider that, I think for me personally, that's a red line that's crossed over. I also am concerned about the sunken carport. Really, I mean, you can say we'll try and prevent it from becoming flooded, but have you seen around the roads around Thatcham? We know we are going to be wet. We've had now, the whole of July's rain in 1 week. I don't think that's going to go away. So I do have concerns on those, and they are genuine concerns. And it's as an on-balance issue. This one, as you said, there's a lot of good things about this. They've done hard work. They've laid it out very well, and I admire the architect and what they've done with it. So I'm not dead set against it, but I have to say at the moment, because officers say, well, no, there isn't some regulation that we can put on this. I have to say that I can't support this. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I certainly can't profess to have the level of lighting knowledge that Councillor Cotham's got, and I'm also not an engineer or a drainage expert. And in some respects, I'm sort of glad of that, and I am grateful to the officers. I'm grateful to Simon and Alice for providing the explanations and clarifications that they have. To an extent, we kind of have to take on board the guidance and the information that we are provided with. I think what we are trying to do, as Councillor Sumner has correctly pointed out, is balance the competing priorities and decide, where our judgment should land. And I think it is important to bear in mind. And by the way, I do think that the lighting issue is a little bit of a red herring. I do think, based on everything that I've heard, it can be appropriately controlled by planning conditions. I certainly don't want to cut across anything that anybody else has said, but I'm sort of mindful of the fact that this area is already established residential to a point. I appreciate it's not an urban area, but there are other dwellings nearby. There will be light added to that, of course there will, but that is the result of creating a new dwelling. What we need to do, I think, as members, is balance the risks associated with creating a new dwelling at this location with the fact that if we say no to this, an existing structure will fall into disrepair. I know that it's being used, but I think we also have to think about the long-term viability of the area and what it's being used for at the moment. Look, if I'm honest, I think this application should be commended. We don't have enough homes in this country. I appreciate we can have a debate around, well, is it an affordable home? What's it going to cost? Who's going to buy it? But we're not here to answer that question tonight. We're here to decide whether or not to grant planning on the balance. I've heard all of the concerns. I think they're valid concerns. There are certainly valid concerns around access. Again, Councillor Sumner has pointed out that it's a narrow lane. I know it's a narrow lane. We've got lots and lots of them. I don't think that and the other concerns are enough for me to say that we should object to this. And on balance, I think we should be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Till to advise us on whether we can control internal lighting, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I've heard a lot, and particularly thank you to Councillor Cottam, which has provided me, and I've been discussing this with the case officer as you've been in debate, has provided me with some satisfaction that there would be a case to be made for what is, in my experience, quite an exceptionally unusual condition, but at the same time would be justified on grounds of severe concerns with lighting overspill. That a condition requiring details of internal lighting to be provided and approved prior to occupation of the proposed dwelling could be applied should members choose to add that to the resolution if they were moving to approval on this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to come back in and thank you for that, Mr. Till. That's helpful. I just wanted to come back to Councillor Cottam's point about the light that could or would more likely be used if this was an in-farm use. I think the difference is, what I'm hearing, the difference is, if it was farm use, it would be totally uncontrollable. Now, common sense would dictate you're not going to leave your brightest light bulbs on all day long. I take that, absolutely. But what I'm hearing is, if it was being used like that, it wouldn't be controllable. Where what we've got is currently 2 conditions with the potential of a third. And for me, if we boil it down to lighting being the thing that's breaking the back on this one, for me, there's enough coming through now from what we've got in front of us and what we've just been told that I think there is going to be better control. And on that basis, Chairman, I'm going to propose that with the conditions and that additional condition, we approve the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Pemberton, thank you. Does anybody else want to speak in the debate before we take a vote? Okay, in that case, we'll move to the vote. Please, could I have all those in favour of the proposal, which is officer's recommendation plus the conditions and additional conditions in the update sheet plus this additional condition to control internal lighting? Could everybody in favour please show? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So the application has been approved subject to those additional conditions. Okay. Next, can we then move on to the next item, which is the same premises, but the list of building consent? Could I ask Alice Atwood to introduce the application, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This is for the listed building consent. The proposal is the same, which is for internal and external alterations to allow for changes use of listed building to a dwelling, including the erection of vehicle access, carport, and the provision of footpath. It's been brought to you because there's been more than 10 objections, and the recommendation is to give the development manager to be authorised to grant conditional planning permission. So the listed building application has been made under listed, the listed building consent application is made under the provisions under the Planning Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990. In considering whether to grant listed building consent for any works to you have to give regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting and any special architectural features or historic interest. So consequently, the main issue for members to consider is whether the proposal would preserve the special architectural and historical interests of the listed building. Hawkridge Farm is Grade 2 listed. The Barnes listing describes the building as timber frames with brick and flint plinth, with weatherball sides, with an old tiled hip roof, with a cat side and outer shot to the southeast, with a hip car entrance in third bay to the north, to the east to the north. The barn has 2 car entrances to the south of the property. The same location plan and the same works are proposed. Just showing you that. Here's some more pictures of the elevations of the barn, just to remind you. It's northeast, east, south. And then looking at the inside the barn, the timber frame. So here we need to consider policy CS 14 and CS 19. Paragraph 205 of the NPPF says, when considering the impact of proposed development based on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the conservation of the asset. CS 19 is consistent with this policy, and where appropriate, enhancement of heritage assets in their setting. So the main issue here is whether the proposal preserves the historic interest of the building. The conservation officer does not support the obscure glazing, but is content with this proposal in every other regard. The obscure glazing would lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of the barns. Officers understand that the addition of obscure glazing may cause some level of harm, but when this is weighed against the public benefits prevail. This also will lead to the barn being its most optimal use. The barn has been separated from its agricultural unit. There's no suitable, it's not suitable in terms of animal welfare and storage. The land associated with it is too small for the size of the barn, and Class E and B uses would not be considered acceptable in this rural area. And therefore, the only optimal use would be for it to be an independent dwelling. We consider that the public benefits would be the long-term conservation of the barn, the investment of it being a dwelling. They'd invest, and that would have the long-term maintenance. So we consider that the public benefits would outweigh any harm caused by the obscure glazing, and therefore it complies with CS 19. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any highways comments, please?
There are no comments, Mr. Chairman.
It could be, again, we have people who wish to speak on this. First of all, Bucklebury Parish Council, could I ask Councillor David Southgate to come back to the podium, please? And again, you have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning?
Could I just check on the process here, because I'm going to read out exactly the same words as I did previously. And the application to a greater extent is almost identical. So my comments will be pretty much the same.
Well,
if you wish us to all do the same, then I am happy to do so. I'm just wish to understand the benefit in such an approach, sir.
Well, I would suggest it'd be best to kind of concentrate on the heritage aspects of the application, because there's a listed building consent. So it's the effect of the proposal on the actual fabric of the building, really.
Okay, except the application covers all aspects of the particular piece of building work. So that's why I just raised the question, sir.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
So the application covers virtually all the same ground as the previous one we've reviewed.
Right.
So if I don't mention the previous stuff, is that then taken into account, or is that actually considered in the other one? Sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to understand what we're trying to achieve here.
Well, as I said, this is the building consent. So for example, any issues about overlooking or whatever that we discussed before, or light pollution is not really relevant in this case, because or access to the road or this kind of thing, because this is purely listed building consent. So yes, thank you.
Okay, I mean this will be a
Chairman, maybe I can be of help here, if you don't mind. For example, the Corn Exchange was a listed building, okay, Class 2 listed building, before it was refurbished. But so in effect, it was listed because of the frames, the metal frames that were used. So those were what were being protected in this case. So if officers agree, I see it, this is you're preserving the historical value of the edifice itself alone, not any of the things that we've earlier discussed. That's correct.
I think that sums things up very well, yes.
Please.
Hopefully I can offer a little clarification that might just assist and add to what's already been said. The listed building consent considers only the impact of works on the fabric and the significance of the listed building. So what would usually be material planning considerations in the form of the highway, overlooking of neighbouring amenity space provision for the occupants, and for example, ecology impacts, drainage impacts, those matters unless they relate directly to the works that are proposed to the fabric or the setting of the listed building, which in some cases they may in this application because they, for example, the parking provision would stand to be works within the setting of the listed building. But other matters in terms of highway safety, for example, are not material in consideration of the impact of the works on the fabric and setting of the listed building and the character of the listed building. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I would try and do this bit on the fly because our comments on this particular one are exactly the same as the comments on the previous one. Yeah, so I will try and sift out those that are pertinent to this particular case.
So, would you like a warning when you get towards the end?
I don't think it'll take that long. I've introduced myself to you before, so thank you for that. We're sympathetic to the planned future use of this listed and biddable barn. We do have concerns about the proposal. It's primarily in the setting of this particular listed building and the impact that the additions will have on that setting, in particularly the carport and the vehicles associated with the new building. We think that will have an impact on how this listed building will look. I then also like to come down to the issue associated with the privacy glass. What I think the solution of skewer glazing will have significant adverse visual impact on the rural area and also on the listed building, as at odds with the traditional appearance of the barn. And if I refer to the email exchange between planning and your senior conservation and design officer, there is significant concern raised within that document associated with the appearance and the effect this has on the listed building, which I think has been with the debate that's gone on within that email. It's come down to a response which is associated with I don't like it, but if you say it's going to happen kind of stuff, then that's what it is. I may have wrongly paraphrased that, but so our concern would be based on the appearance in trying to comply with the desire to achieve the planning. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you just remain a moment in case there's any questions from members. Any questions, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. And so could I ask the objectors, Russell Meadows and Christine Dunn, to come to the podium, please? Again, you have 5 minutes between you. Well, there's just the one of you.
Yeah, I was a bit like the council not thinking I'll be doing two, but I've got a few things I'd like to say.
Okay, if you'd like to, would you like a warning towards?
I don't think I'll need.
Okay.
So the listed building, it has been used as an agricultural barn within the last 10 years. I used it as an agricultural barn up until 2020. I had agricultural machinery in that barn, and the consultant in the 2020 application shows my tractor and farm equipment in it. There was also housing bits in there as well, but I've used it from the 80s until 2020. So it is not correct to say it hasn't been used for the last 10 years. The planning consultant also took a photograph in March 2021, making this very point. But in that photograph, my tractor auger is seen hanging from a beam in this barn. So I just make the point that it has been used more recently for agriculture. A barn is a shed. This idea that you can't use this barn with modern agricultural practices is a fallacy. It's just a shed. Farmers use their barns for all sorts of things. You could easily put a new tractor in this barn. You could put animals in this barn. We had sheep in this barn and we protected it. When we were lambing in it, we would line the walls with hurdles and wood to protect the barn. That could be done tomorrow. The applicant chooses not to. That is his right. But a future person could use this barn for an agricultural purpose, and there is a substantial amount of land around. On the other side of the road from this barn is a 55-acre field. When we farmed it, we used to rent fields in Buckleby Village. Farmers very often don't own their own land. They have to rent it. That could happen in this particular instance. Modern building regulations are onerous, as you people all know far more than me. The requirements that are going to be put to convert this barn into a house will, I think, risk damaging this barn far more than leaving it as it is at the moment and used for the various purposes that the owner now has it and in the future. They're not going to let it fall into disrepair because this barn is valuable. It's an asset. It's on the other side of their drive, so they can easily see if it needs maintenance and they can get on the case very quickly. You, the council, have the power to enforce the owners to keep it in good condition. There are laws to keep these listed buildings in good condition so they can be implemented. And as I said, it's a valuable asset, so there's no way anybody who owns this barn is going to let it fall into disrepair. Regarding use, the applicants have removed a lot of the historic parts to their driveway where they park their cars. But you could park your car in the barn. It would make a fantastic car park for the people that own Hawkridge House. They could also use it as a workshop to maintain those cars. The proposal of the carport has been said to be an elegant solution. It isn't an elegant solution. It will flood. And the proposed soakaway will not work because the drain from the soakaway goes down towards the pond. So when the pond is full, where's the drain from that soakaway going to drain to? It's got nowhere to go apart from the pond or the road. It can't just disappear into the ground because the ground will be waterlogged. The carport is said to be underground, but the reality was when we had the visit the other day and the committee came, we suddenly realised that this carport is going to be up to 5 feet high above the ground. So it's going to be visually intrusive. That is not, when you look at the plans, that is not immediately obvious. But once we're outside and someone asked that question, you could see that the roof of this carport comes up to just below the window. The ground is sloping. So I measured it the other day. It's about 5 foot, but actually as that ground goes down, it isn't 5 foot. It's probably more like 6 or 7 feet. So the cars will be very visually intrusive when they can't use the carport and it only holds 2. Anybody that visits the premises will have to park on the de facto turning head, which, by the way, the applicant stated was the size and shape was on the diagram. But I challenge you to find it on that diagram because I can't see it. So they have a carte blanche to build any size car park for these cars.
So could you draw your remarks to a close, please?
When people drive past this area, they are just going to see a lot of cars parked outside this barn. And at night, all the lights of those cars will be visible. Thank you.
Should I just remain in case there's any questions from members? No, thank you very much. Could Kate Russell come forward again, please, as a supporter? And again, if you could kind of restrict your remarks to the listed building aspects, please.
Okay, I haven't got anything more to add. I would just like to really say thank you very much for listening, actually, because I truly do love old things. I'm a furniture restorer. I've been a furniture restorer for 30 years. And I believe in buildings and they should be restored, they should be loved. People like myself train really hard to learn our skills and we know what we're doing. And it's really lovely that people like myself who are more on the building conservation rather than my side are going to have the chance to actually work on these buildings alongside the restrictions and people like the councillors who have the restrictions. So I'm really glad that it's going to go ahead. So thank you ever so much.
We'll just just in case there's any questions. No, thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Thank you. I could ask the applicant and agent to come forward again, please. And
so we're going to make it very brief. I'm not going to talk on this occasion, so I'm going to sit down, but I will be available for questions.
Would you like a warning?
No, I'm going to be very brief. There's a very important game that's going on at the moment. I understand you'll probably all be very keen to get to see the penalties, perhaps. I don't know. I just would like to say, in terms of the listed building consent, there has been a very detailed joint by joint structural report and an additional structural report that has looked at every single timber in this building. And that important record and detail will be taken through the very detailed conditions which are proposed as part of this listed building consent. So every last detail will be controlled by the conditions imposed on this. I'm just going to make a very brief comment about the contradiction about uses and complaints about uses by the last speaker. You've granted now consent for change of use, so none of those points are material. And in terms of the carport, I would point you simply to the comments of the conservation officer who described it would be generally visually unintrusive in her comments. And that's really all I wanted to say, and I'll ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. I mean, as you say, a lot of the roofing has been replaced. I was impressed by some of the very old structural beams. You're saying, of course, and I'm sure our officers would not let you remove those or damage those. But are you taking those and enhancing them in any way internally?
Yes, there's a very detailed structural report, which is part of the planning application papers, which explains the sensitive repair of each of those beams and structures and joints. And that's all been considered in detail by the conservation officer. There were some intrusive works looking at the floor that they asked us to do, to look into the ground and look at potential structural stability in relation to the building, the carport, and they were satisfied with all the detail, a lot of detail, that considered that the frame will stay intact with the works proposed around it.
Okay.
But I'll just give you an example. So some of the repairing has been quite agricultural in nature, as you would expect, being a barn. So non-historic timber is being used nails. So what we have detailed in the report is that every single joint will be taken back using the traditional method, the peg and jointing. So that's our intention. So it will be a much better structure as a result of the work that we would do, proposing to do.
Thank you, Chairman.
Are there any other questions for the applicant or the agent? Thank you very much. Thank you. Could I call the local member again, please? Councillor Reid. And would you like a warning?
Yes, please, Chairman. I don't think I'll be that long there. So the listed side of this, I have significant concerns on myself. So it's one of the last, if not the last, of the barns near its original state in the area. I can think of two. One has actually recently come in front of this committee. It's Aubrey Farm. There is also Rushall Farm, Black Barn, which has now, as you know, is converted into an area where you can hold events. There is also a once derelict barn quite close on the River Pang itself, which was a watermill. It was, because it was in a derelict state, I think there was allowed to be, not sure it was listed, but unfortunately now the outside of which is now significantly changed, and it's of little character than its original state. So I have those concerns that the listed, the keeping the character of the barn may be significantly changed. In addition, to say that this will stop it going into a derelict state itself, well, really, that's the council should not be choosing whether to enforce owners to keep them in the right state. We should be enforcing that, but I think that's another matter. There are also concerns, I think, that were sent to the members today on the effect of insulation on the barn itself. And I think they should be considered and also debated. And it would be good to hear the members' views on that. I have also significant concerns, as previously raised on the previous application, on the surface covering and the damage that will happen during that piece of work. And again, you know, if modern boards are put in front, then that will change the character of the building significantly, as will the tiling. As to the modern carport, it's definitely not in keeping in the area. I cannot think of one that is around with a significantly important listed building within the ward or outside the ward around Bucklebury that has such a garage or carport. So those are my views, members, and it would be lovely to hear you debating them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the local member, please? Thank you very much. Move on then to questions for officers. Members have any questions, please?
I think I should just basically take the question points raised by Councillor Reid and the insulation of and materials used when being rebuilt.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll actually cover off the insulation because I drafted a condition this afternoon that requires provision of details, notwithstanding those details that are shown on the plans. And to provide members with a bit of background, because this did come late in the afternoon through the additional update sheet that officers provided, there was an objection from the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings on the grounds of some of the forms of insulation that are proposed to be used. Officers don't think that that is a fundamental objection to this listed building consent. We view it as a technical objection on the details currently proposed. Consequently, on your update sheet, on your additional update sheet for this application at point 3, there's a condition that is recommended that states no structural works to the listed barn should take place until full details of all insulation treatments to be used in conversion of the building have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The works shall be constructed in accordance with the approved insulation details. And I'd also like to add to that condition the wording, this is notwithstanding any details shown on the existing plans.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions? Thank you. Let's move into debate, please. Anybody who'd like to start the debate?
Okay, my turn first. I'm still not totally happy with this. The carport, when you does detract slightly from the actual view of the building, as will any vehicle. But as pointed out to me, you could have a tractor there. So that one I don't have an answer for. I'd like to hear what other councillors have to say.
Councillor Bayes.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, one point that one of the objectors have raised was the fact that we could still put a agricultural vehicle into the barn. If they can get there, then perhaps that could be used for a carport and avoid the need for the subterranean carport. If that's a possibility, I don't know. But as far as the insulation is concerned, I've had similar problems with insulation in my house. Wood ants go for the cork, and I had to renew that, which was a large flat roofed area. So wood ants are a problem with cork, and mice and wasps are a problem with some of the polystyrene insulation materials. So we have to be careful what materials we are using. I mean, I haven't got a full library on what's available, but I would be concerned, put it that way, about the materials they're using. But I like the idea, both between the rafter insulation and below the rafter, if that's necessary. But going back to the carport area, if you can get an agricultural tractor inside, you could still use that for a carport. Whether it will give you enough space, I don't know, but it's a point to be considered.
As we've often been reminded in the past, Councillor Maysby, you have to consider the application before.
Yeah, I know that, yeah, but we're
we
looking
can't
at the
really
options now, aren't we?
suggest major changes.
I'm aware of that, but that's my point.
Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, good point, well made. I think the trouble is we've already been through all of those bits, and the internal and the external alterations have already been covered in the previous application. So we've kind of discussed and accepted the carport. To say it's an unusual solution that we don't often see, unless we're looking at bigger block buildings where underground car parking is preferred as to making sure that you've got the space to do it. I'm pleased to see Mr. Till's response to the late comment that came in from the consultation. I think that addresses the scrutiny of the work that will be carried out before it's carried out. And I think on that basis, it's moving in the right direction, and it will be. It feels to me that this is supportive of the previous application that we've approved. So this ensures that we are content that the work is being done in the right way, with the right fashion, the right methods, and not to the detriment of the current structure for the time that the work is finished. Not wishing to foreclose on anybody else coming in, I'm happy again to propose officer's recommendation.
With that additional condition.
With the additional.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Taylor. Anybody else wish to speak? In that case, could we move to the, please, could all those in favour of officer's recommendation plus the additional condition to cover insulation, please show. Those against, please. That's one. Thank you very much. So the list of building consent has been given with the additional condition about the control of the insulation. Thank you very much. So that's all the business of the meeting. So I'd like to draw it to a close, and thank you all very much for your contributions. Thank you.